Hello, Kirkwood Public Library patrons. This is Nick. I'm here today with Valerie Kienzle. Sorry if I'm butchering your last name. Um, but we are going to talk about her new book, Ready to Wear, A History of the Footwear and Garment Industries in St. Louis. So I'm going to give the floor to her in just a second, but if anybody has questions, enter them in the chat right now. I'm going to be I'm going to be admitting people as they come. So if you want to take it from here, Valerie.
Okay, well, thank you for joining me today. I want to tell you a story about a little bit of history, St. Louis, that maybe not a lot of people realize. We know that once upon a time, St. Louis was founded as a fur trading village in 1764, but St. Louis was also a world leader in footwear and clothing production in the late 19th and early to mid 20th century. In recent years, the fashion conscious people have often looked to the East and West Coast for innovative, stylish shoes and clothing. But many people are surprised to learn that St. Louis, located in the heart of the Midwest, not usually thought of as a trend-setting place, was for many decades a garment and footwear industry hub. The list of renowned footwear manufacturers, clothing designers, milliners, and retailers who lived and worked in St. Louis is lengthy and impressive. And these included Brown Shoe Company, and today known as Caleres, International Shoe Company, and Angelica Company. Few people today realize that also the junior dress market segment was born, developed, and flourished in St. Louis from the 1930s through the 1960s. Buyers for New York retailers flocked to St. Louis twice a year to view and order dresses and footwear for their coastal customers. But the River City was a leader in shoes and clothing long before the introduction of the junior label. St. Louis was founded as a fur trading capital. It was really ideally located. It had the Mississippi, it had the Missouri River, the Illinois River, plus it was right in basically the center of the United States. So it was a likely candidate for fur trading. And then things could be shipped up and down the rivers. Think of that as the super highway of that time period. And then as trains came and transcontinental train tracks were laid, and then trucks and further distribution, St. Louis was just in a perfect position to be a major supply stop and hub for whatever was coming and going. Also, if you think about St. Louis, we are called the gateway to the West. In the 1840s, 50s, 60s, it literally was the last supply stop in the United States as people were headed out west. Think in terms of the gold rush, 1849 gold rush. St. Louis literally had lots of dry goods stores, and people would buy things like clothing and ready-wear clothing and fabrics and ammunition and foodstuffs and things like that before their trips west, because they really didn't know when they'd have a chance to get more supplies. And therefore, St. Louis developed into a manufacturing hub. At first, it was people sewing things by hand, cobblers making shoes by hand down along the riverfront near the wharf area. And then as manufacturing progressed, shoes, shirtwaists, suits, hats, undergarments, skins, coats, uniforms, and much, much more were made here and shipped throughout the United States. St. Louis's Washington Avenue is a lengthy downtown thoroughfare, and it was once the center of the city's footwear and garment production. Its Romanesque and Italianate buildings once hummed with the activity of sewing machines, lasting machines making shoes, and conveyor belts, as well as the chatter of thousands of workers. There was no type of air conditioning or heating, so the windows were open. It was a very noisy, bustling place. The streets were filled with crowds of people, carts, trucks, raw materials, wool, cotton, pelts, fur, and finished products. And so the nonstop drone of stitching machines and people hard at work could be heard on every street corner. Washington Avenue was nicknamed Shoe Street, USA, also the street, and the area was called the Garment District during much of the 20th century. And at the early part of the 20th century, St. Louis was the 4th largest city in the US. Let's take a look at some notable moments and people related to St. Louis and garment industries. As we said, they were the last stop before people headed west. And then here were dry goods stores that built up, other clothing manufacturers. Think about Abraham Lincoln, the tall hat that he wore. If you look at this picture, this is beaver pelt, and it became very popular in the 19th century. So popular that beaver pelts that came through St. Louis were subsequently shipped to Europe. European beaver pelt tall stovepipe hats became very popular, especially in England. This image is of a woman named Elizabeth Keckley. She was born into slavery in Virginia, and she worked for her enslaver as a seamstress and a dressmaker when they moved to St. Louis. Word of Miss Keckley's excellent sewing skills spread, and her enslaver let her out to other people. She could sew for other people, and some of the money she made from taking sewing assignments, she saved. And she was able to save enough to purchase the freedom for herself and for her young son. And once she had their freedom secured, she relocated to Washington, D.C. In Washington, D.C. in 1860, she went to work again as a seamstress and quickly established her reputation with the elite of Washington, and she was known as an excellent seamstress. Mary Todd Lincoln heard about her services and was just wowed by the quality. And so she secured Ms. Keckley's services exclusively for most of the time President Lincoln was in the White House. This is one of her creations, I'm told. The junior clothing segment for women, as I said, was developed in St. Louis. There was a gentleman named Irving L. Sorger, who in conjunction with dress design students at Washington University School of Fine Arts, came up with the concept to dress young women that they didn't necessarily want to dress the same way as their mothers and their grandmothers. So he saw some of these designs that the WashU students were coming up with. He decided to make up a few garments, and they sold immediately. The concept, different sleeves, embellishments, fun collars, higher hemlines, and then this concept of junior clothing, as I said earlier, spread to the East and West Coast and still remains a market segment. St. Louis footwear companies excelled at marketing and promotions. The concept of Buster Brown shoes for children began at the Louisiana Purchase Exhibition, the 1904 World's Fair. A real live Buster Brown and his dog Ty toured the US for many years. This Buster, however, was not a child. He was actually a petite adult. His name was Major Ray, but he apparently created much commotion. He would ride on trains city to city, and children just swarmed and brought their parents. And as a result, they wanted to wear Buster Brown shoes. The companies behind Buster Brown and also Red Goose was produced by International Shoe Company, were early users of promotional giveaway items aimed at children. The Weatherbird that is often seen daily on the, he's a tiny cartoon character. He's seen in the Post-Dispatch and has been since 1901. He also inspired a line of children's shoes and became the Peters Shoe Company's official spokesbird here in St. Louis. These were some of the gimmicks. These were called clickers, and they were very popular with children. Think about, there's still fast food restaurants that entice children to bring their parents in so they can get a toy or some kind of prize in with a meal. Well, this was the same thing that was going on with Red Goose shoes and Buster Brown shoes, and it started here in St. Louis. Interesting marketing concept. That's the Weatherbird. Okay, President William Howard Taft was a large man, and he had large, hard-to-fit feet. His shoes were custom made by St. Louis's Brown Shoe Company, today known as Caleres. Also, the world's tallest man, Alton, Illinois resident Robert Pershing Wadlow, measured 8 feet and 11 inches and wore a size 37 shoe. His shoes had to be custom made by International Shoe Company. In the 1930s, Mr. Wadlow became a traveling spokesperson for International Shoe Company, traveling to thousands of places and many miles in an automobile that was specially designed to accommodate his height. And every city he visited, he left one of his size 37 leather shoes. The building that now houses City Museum was once an International Shoe Company warehouse. And if you have ever been there and come down the slide or seen some of the poster railings that go up some of the stairwells, this was all part of the conveyor system that moved cases of shoes for International Shoe Company. A piece of trivia is, if you are familiar with author, playwright Tennessee Williams, he once worked at International Shoe Company's downtown facility, as did his father. His father sold Red Goose shoes. Tennessee Williams, whose name was Tom at the time, he flunked out of Mizzou and he hated work in the factory, but he did strike up conversations with many of his workers. And he later said that he found inspiration for some of his characters in his famous works, including Streetcar Named Desire and The Glass Menagerie. International Shoe Company, Brown Shoe Company, and Hamilton Brown Shoe Company were the three suppliers of hundreds of thousands of pairs of military boots and shoes during both World Wars. Other items made in St. Louis included uniforms, leggings, and helmets. Alligator Oil Clothing Company in St. Louis supplied millions of waterproof clothing items to the US military during the 20th century. In 1924, St. Louis was home to 161 clothing and garment-related companies. Most were located in or near Washington Avenue. Straw Hat, Field Hat, Harvest Hat, Sun Hat, whatever the name, the utilitarian headgear worn for decades by those working in the agriculture business were produced. The concept started here in St. Louis. Also, Brown Shoe Company produced the official Girl Scout and Boy Scout shoes for many decades. And there was a company here that made the official Girl Scout uniforms. This was the home of George Warren Brown. He was the founder of Brown Shoe Company, today's Caleres. He and Oscar Johnson, a founder of Roberts Johnson Rand Shoe Company, another company located, headquartered here in St. Louis. Today, its headquarters building is called the Last Hotel, Windows on Washington. They lived next door to each other in an enclave called Portland Place in the Central West End. Their mansions still exist today, but word has it that even though they were competitors, they were actually pretty congenial neighbors. At one time, St. Louis was home to more than 20 manufacturing and footwear companies and facilities, earning it the motto in the 1940s, first in booze, first in shoes, and last in the American League. The slogan referred to the city's leadership in brewing and footwear production and the losing record of the St. Louis Browns baseball team. One time in the 1930s, A regional manager of Chicago's Continental Baking Company was visiting St. Louis, and he was on one of the streets through downtown. He saw a billboard for St. Louis-made Twinkle Toe shoes. They were headquartered here. He was looking for a name for his new cake concoction, and he decided Twinkle Toes Twinkies. Twinkies, that's it. That would be a good name for his newly discovered, developed snack cake. And the rest, as they say, is history. St. Louis manufacturing and footwear companies employed hundreds of German immigrants in the early 20th century. In an effort to help the new citizens assimilate into St. Louis and its culture, International Shoe Company offered English classes. Several St. Louis-based shoe companies once built factories within the Jefferson City prison and used inmate labor to manufacture footwear. The agreements between the shoe companies from St. Louis and prison officials in Jefferson City were called leasing labor agreements. This practice later was outlawed by the Missouri legislature. The iconic cherry dress and the boys' cherry romper sold for many decades by the Women's Exchange of St. Louis since probably the mid-20th century. Are St. Louis originals. They were designed by a recently divorced mother who needed to support herself. The popularity of the cherry dress and the cherry boys romper skyrocketed after toddler John F. Kennedy Jr. was photographed wearing the romper at Easter in 1962. Moss and Steffen Fur Company of St. Louis encouraged trappers and hunters to send their skins and pelts through the U.S. mail. The only skin pelts that they did not recommend be sent through the mail were skunk pelts, and it was recommended that they be sent through express mail. And this practice of mailing pelts continued well into the last half of the 20th century. Fur auction houses were numerous in St. Louis, mostly along the riverfront in what is now the Gateway Arch Park grounds, but there were many fur warehouses down there near the river. Fur auction items once available in St. Louis and shipped throughout the world included pelts, skins, and robes from exotic animals to common animals, including sealskin, mink, mole, squirrel, 3 different kinds, badger, marmot, muskrat, 5 varieties, fox, multiple varieties and colors, chinchilla, martens, which is a bushy-tailed large pod mammal, otter, sable, lynx, rabbit, hare, possum, kangaroo, ermine, beaver, lamb, raccoon, and even house cat. The International Fur Exchange building was a huge warehouse built at the corner of Market and 4th Streets. And rather than tear down the building, Drury Hotels built its hotel that exists now around the International Fur Company. Many of the building's beautiful details can now be seen inside the lobby of the hotel. Most of the beautiful buildings along Washington Avenue were designed to be beautiful, not with cheap labor or cheap designs. They were designed by leading architects of the time in the early 20th century, including Theodore Link, who also designed St. Louis Union Station, Isaac Taylor, who designed the Missouri History Museum and multiple World's Fair buildings, and Albert B. Groves, who was St. Louis's City Hall Rotunda designer. But Washington Avenue has also experienced some hard times in more recent decades. As footwear and clothing manufacturing shifted overseas during the 1960s and the 1970s and familiar brand names disappeared, the Washington Avenue area began declining. By the 1980s, the neighborhood was desolate and many buildings had been abandoned. In recent years, however, Washington Avenue has been reborn, revitalized, and renewed. Today, the area once known as St. Louis's Garment District is a hip destination known for its repurposed buildings and its amazing architectural details. It's alive with residences, nightlife, dining options, businesses, And the formation of St. Louis's Fashion Fund in 2014 has helped attract some of these national attention, national businesses to come back to St. Louis, to give it another chance to open up a new generation of clothing and footwear designers and seamsters. And that's what's happening. And again, it's all along Washington Avenue. Thanks to the tireless effort of local preservationists and generous tax credits, more than a dozen structures related to the wearable industry are listed on the National Register of Historic Places. In addition, 3 areas on or near Washington Avenue have been designated National Register Historic Districts. Street pavers, if you look at this picture in the rain, you can see them right down the middle. Street pavers simulating a zipper stitch are embedded in a portion of Washington Avenue, and at night LED lights in the area resemble shirt buttons. These pay homage to the area's garment history and the industry itself. The expansive building housing the City Museum at 701 North 15th Street, as I said, once housed International Shoe Company facilities. The Fashion Square building at 1305 Washington Avenue, and the B Hat Company building on Washington Avenue, all once displayed hats and clothing for wholesale buyers. Today, the buildings have been made into lofts for residences and offices. And the American Planning Association has even named Washington Avenue one of the top 10 great streets in the United States for the last several years. In essence, Washington Avenue is being reborn. Ready to Wear, A History of the Footwear and Garment Industries in St. Louis is one of the latest volumes from local publisher Reedy Press out of South St. Louis. It weaves fact-filled narrative and vintage images into a colorful history of an often overlooked part of St. Louis history. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them.
Well, thank you for that presentation. I would like to start off with some questions. You kind of ended off there with a lot of what's left, a lot of these buildings that are now historic places. I was wondering, what are some of the main places you can visit to see remnants of this industry? What were some of the buildings or landmarks or things like the thing about the City Museum, those rollers? I had no idea about that. That fascinated me. What other kinds of things can you see like that?
The Fashion Square building sits down on Washington Avenue, about 13th, 14th Street. It's got a big block that says Fashion Square etched into the stone. And that was once a place, it was like a merchandise mart where there were all different kinds of manufacturers and people who made components related to the garment industry. And so that big stone is still there. If you go to the last hotel, which, as I said, was once Roberts Johnson Rand's shoe company's headquarters, you will see that many of the Art Deco embellishments that were put into the lobby shows cobblers. And there's some along the outside of the building as well, and little, not gargoyles, but they're little characters that give a nod to the footwear industry. Also, if you're on Washington Avenue, pretty close, but across the street from Fashion Square, there are the Knickerbocker Lofts. Well, that sign is left from when it was Knickerbocker Clothing. They made pants and overalls and things like that. And so you can see a few things like that. People that are sensitive have kept some of the details that were part of the buildings. For me, it's just a matter of walking up and down Washington Avenue, and instead of looking down, look up. Just look at some of the embellishments, some of the beauty, some of the care that was put into just the details for this warehouse system. I will tell you, since the book came out, I have heard from several family members who remembered going and visiting grandparents or their parents that owned some of these warehouses and companies in St. Louis. Some fascinating stories. One gentleman said that his grandfather had owned a business, a clothing business down there, and that, again, they were not air conditioned. If it was 100 degrees, a sweltering day in St. Louis, you could count on it being 10 to 20 degrees hotter inside the warehouses. Thus, lots of windows were open. They had lots of water fountains in his grandfather's factory, but they also had containers of salt tablets by the water fountains, and they encouraged their employees to please consume these tablets as you're getting your drinks of water. And this gentleman said his grandfather's facility was quite literally in the summertime a sweatshop. But he also said his grandfather would look with binoculars across the street to see what the production company across the street, who was the competition, to see what they were producing that day or that week. So just fun little stories like that.
Wow. So there's the stuff you can see about the manufacturing, like you said, like the buildings, but can you see any of the actual garments? Are there any places in St. Louis where you can see or look at any of these historical dresses and outfits?
Okay, the Missouri Historical Society over on Skinker has just an unbelievable collection of clothing and footwear from all different generations, all different decades, all centuries, really. And many of them are in such pristine condition. You do have to have an appointment. I was lucky enough to have a curator spend a morning with me and show me some of these amazing garments that have been preserved. And the little black dress display, which was at the History Museum, I think about a year and a half, 2 years ago, those were all garments and items from their collection at the History Museum, and many had been made in St. Louis, which is pretty amazing. But they just have drawers and drawers of archival materials, shoes. And the shoes, some of them you can see they date back to companies that existed the late 1900s, and they're really, really in great shape. So if you can get yourself an appointment with a curator, it's well worth it, in my opinion.
No, I would imagine that would be. I'd love to see some of that stuff. I don't. Do you know why the fashion industry started to shift towards other places in the middle of the century?
Okay, there's probably several factors. As the 20th century progressed, there were labor unions that wanted to get into footwear production facilities and clothing production facilities. Some of the footwear companies did not want to be unionized. What they did was then go to a number of different small towns around Missouri and southern Illinois, and places like Kirksville and Columbia and St. Charles and Marshall, Missouri. And the companies would come to these small towns and say, okay, if you will give us land and utilities, we will build a production facility here, and we will ensure jobs for the people in this town, and it will be a mutually beneficial arrangement. That's what many of the footwear manufacturers did to avoid unionization. But eventually things were unionized, and production costs, raw material costs went up, and quite frankly, it just became cheaper to outsource things and to go to other countries where the labor was cheaper.
Okay, so my what I wonder then is when it did start to see, you started to see like New York and Los Angeles become so known for their garments and their fashion. I'm wondering, was there a time when a lot of that iconic fashion you saw, for instance, in Hollywood, was any of that coming from St. Louis?
Yes, some of it was. Yes, the 1930s and 1940s, some of it was. Not all of it, but some of it, yes.
Wow, yeah. So I'm wondering, what kind of things you might see in a film like that was made here, and we I guess we can't know, but that's really something to think about.
That would be hard to pinpoint.
Right, but okay. So I was wondering if, what was my next question? Well, in the same way, because you started to touch on the end there, the way that the Washington Avenue Garment District is kind of coming back to life in all these different ways. And I know that St. Louis has been trying for a long time now to build itself back up. And do you think that, considering how integral the fashion industry was to St. Louis being such a success in its early years, do you think the fashion industry will be important to revitalizing St. Louis if we ever get there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I visited a facility down on Washington Avenue. It's actually closer to Grand Center. And the company is called Evolution STL. They are a knitwear company, a state-of-the-art knitwear company. They specialize in knitwear that has no seams. They make a lot of jerseys, a lot of clothing items, and it's really pretty amazing and state-of-the-art. And they were attracted here by Susan Sherman and the St. Louis Fashion Fund. She was the co-founder and the leader of the St. Louis Fashion Fund. She's still very active in the St. Louis fashion scene. Since 2014, she has been on a mission to attract young seamsters and seamstresses and jewelry makers and clothing makers to come back here. There's Stars Design Group, there's Arch Apparel, there's Rungalee, there's Audra, just some up and coming people, new trends, fresh ideas, just the kind of thing St. Louis can't rest on its laurels. And so attracting all these young, innovative creators is really what St. Louis needs to help it through its, to go through its renaissance and to become a fashion capital again.
Yeah, hopefully. Because, and I think that there's something about St. Louis, there's something about the diversity of it, not just in its population, but in the just the land itself in the area. There's, I mean, they were considering having the movie industry here before they settled in Hollywood. And I think, yeah, that there's something really promising about resettling a lot of these really creative, productive industries in St. Louis, because something about the area, I think, inspires a lot of originality.
Yeah.
This is a little offshoot. I had no idea that I know about that World's Tallest Man because he's in Ripley's Believe It or Not. And I had no idea he was from Alton. So are there any other areas because Alton is in Illinois, but it's almost considered like part of the St. Louis metropolitan area. Are there any other little areas like that outside of St. Louis that have any significance in this industry?
Right at this time that I know of, no. No.
Okay, other than just, that's still really, I had no idea he was so close to us. So that's pretty cool.
Right, and if you've ever seen a picture of his car that he traveled in, it's like the passenger seat front was taken out, and so he's sitting in the back seat, but his legs stretched out all the way up front, and it was a convertible.
Wow.
And his father was his driver, and they literally went thousands of miles all around the country as goodwill ambassador for International Shoe Company.
Wow.
And my husband is also he's in the occupational footwear industry, and he has actually held one of Mr. Wadlow's size 37 shoes. He said it's like putting two big basketball shoes together end to end. It's just unbelievable how large and how much leather it must have taken to outfit this man with a pair of shoes.
Yeah, wow. I've always wondered what it would be like to hold. Like I just happen to know about that man, and that'd be pretty cool to get to see that and to get to see that car if you could. Where's the best place to get your book?
The book is available at all the local booksellers. I am a big promoter of local booksellers. Think Left Bank Books, The Novel Neighbor, Subterranean Books, Main Street Books, places like that. But And also the Missouri History Museum gift shop.
Mhm.
It's available any of those places. And like I said, I do like to support local rather than ordering it online or something like that.
Oh yeah, same here.
It is online, but I
Yeah,
like to
absolutely.
support local personally.
We always try to, because that's going to go right hand in hand with trying to revive, like we were saying, to rebuild
Yeah,
St. Louis, keep our bookstores alive, because we are so lucky to have more than one when so many.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and then we have ordered a copy of the book. So if anybody watching this wants to read the book and can't get their hands on it right away, then we will have that available in circulation. But it's a nice big book, for your home that probably you'd want to have, looking through for a while. So I'd encourage you to pick up that book if you're interested in that stuff at any one of our local bookstores. And of course,
Some great images. They came from multiple sources. If I'll just throw this plug in, the Missouri History Museum has just thousands and thousands of images. And if you want a window into the past, it's great. You can just go online and access these and take a look. Also, many of the images came from the State Historical Society of Missouri, which has an office, a branch over on the UMSL campus, but most of the ones I got specifically came from the Columbia location, which is their headquarters. Also, some of the signs, the promotional items, the vintage things like that came from Greg and Ann Romberg's
mm,
business called Antiques Warehouse. It's in South County, and they just have a fabulous collection and allowed me to come visit and share images of some of their just amazing collection. And some of the things people have told me they remember from their childhood. They remember the red goose pulling the goose's neck and
mm.
getting a golden egg when they bought a pair of red goose shoes. And so the book is factually historical, but it's also just fun to look at some of the vintage imagery too.
Yeah, no, that'll be a big draw, I think, for a lot of our patrons and for me. I love looking at, blown up productions of vintage photos. And that was actually one of the coolest things about your presentation was getting to see a lot of those photos. It made me wonder, I mean, St. Louis must have also had a very strong advertising industry that went right along with the fashion industry to promote
Yes.
those garments. Because there's some really great graphic design, old posters and prints making and stuff like that. So that'll be just as interesting to look at as to read about the history. Okay, well, that's about all the questions I had, and thank you so much for coming and sharing this with us. I honestly I was interested in the subject, but this was a lot of really fascinating stuff I had no idea about. So I encourage all of our patrons, again, if you're watching this, pick up the book, check it out from us if you want to. I would highly recommend it because just seeing the presentation really piqued my interest. So thank you, Valerie, for coming in and sharing this with us.
Thank you for the opportunity.